Hello again, and welcome to another session of the 17th annual Transforming the Teaching and Learning Environment Virtual Campus. I'm Bob Hales, your moderator. Hey, I want to mention we now have a sponsor, the Journal of Educators Online. And in fact, this coming Friday from noon to 1 Central, they're going to be doing a session. So keep that in mind and be nice. I want to keep sponsors happy. We have with us uh, Kirsten Zoller, who's the Executive Director of Strategic Initiatives for Kansas State University, Salina Aerospace and Technology Campus. She provides strategic leadership focused on expanding the campus's educational offerings and tries to respond to a growing workforce. Uh, Lisa Shapey or Shappy? What's this?
Shapay.
I'm sorry.
Shapay.
Okay. Lisa is the director of academic and learning innovation for Kansas State on the Salina Aerospace and Technology campus. Lisa oversees professional education and outreach initiatives as well as academic innovation. So, Lisa and Kirsten, let me turn it over to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Bob. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. As Bob said, my name's Kirsten, and I'm excited to be here with my colleague, Lisa. And I think we're going to get started. Is there anything you'd like to say to get us started, Lisa?
Nope, ready to go.
Okay, so Lisa and I have worked together for several years on a variety of initiatives. And what we're going to talk about today is specifically how we work with subject matter experts that come primarily from outside the faculty body. The lens that we're going to be talking about is specifically how they have worked with us for our non-credit workforce development programs. But we hope that some of the tools and tricks that we share could be applicable even if you're using them in your credit degree programs, online course development, or whatever you might need. So as we go to the next slide, as we think about why would you use a subject matter expert? SME is the term you're going to hear us use throughout this presentation. Um, we utilize SMEs heavily. As Bob said in our introduction, we have our campus is the Aerospace and Technology campus. So we are uniquely focused on serving specific industry sectors with our programs and our educational portfolio. But we do think that this could be applicable to any type of educational program. SMEs are typically outside your traditional faculty body. And although this can bring some challenges, which we'll talk about in a second, we do think there's quite a few benefits, which you see listed on the slide. They typically know exactly what's currently happening in industry. So, especially if you're looking at a very applied type learning course or program, if you're looking at something that is maybe talking about something that's been very quickly evolving and there's a lot of changes, a SME is going to have their pulse on that perhaps a little bit more readily than someone in the traditional faculty body might. They also are going to bring a diversity of teaching methods and viewpoints because they're outside of traditional academia. The way that they're going to interact with both the material and the learners is going to bring some diversity into your program. And one of the reasons that, frankly, we utilize SMEs is the lack of faculty bandwidth in our traditional faculty body, especially as we're looking to build new and innovative programs that may not fit readily into their faculty load or expectations.
Okay, so using industry experts is wonderful and has been a great thing for us in our department, but there's definitely a gap there, right? So while they have all this expertise in their area, they don't generally have instructional experience. And that is a gap because that gap can absolutely affect student learning, right? They don't understand student engagement, and the content may not be well organized. There's a lot of things we kind of have to teach them or help them along with. And so we're going to talk about those gaps, and later we'll talk about how we met those challenges and built those gaps. But some of the challenges for those SMEs is while they're experts in their area, they're not experts in teaching. So they have all this experience in their head, but they don't necessarily know how to take that content, break it out into chunks and make it learnable for your average learner. They don't know scaffolding, they don't know instructional practices. And so they really need that support from an instructional designer to help them to understand how to teach, get that knowledge out of their head and put it down on paper and teach others the things that are in their head. They also don't always understand tools for student engagement. They may be in the techiest field in the world, but the technology they're using in their field doesn't always translate, even to the simplest thing as a learning management system. Many industries use learning management systems, but they're often very different than the simple Canvas we're using. They're usually using much different technology. It's gotten a little better, when we went on the pandemic and we started using Teams and Zoom. There's a little bit of a close on that gap, at least for the communication tools, but that's still a gap with SMEs. But it's important to understand that that's not a reason not to use industry SMEs. In fact, I see it as a opportunity for growth, right? Because when you bring in that industry SME and you pair them with the right instructional designer, it can be this great partnership that really creates a great learning opportunity for your learners. And that creates more opportunities for individuals in the workforce to upskill. And so bringing these two together is really a wonderful way to not only create opportunities within your department, but to create opportunities within your community as well. You can put it in the chat, or if you want to unmute yourself, that is great too. Are any of you using non-faculty subject matters for any of your programs, and how is that going for you? I'm not good with silence, so I'll let it go a little bit longer.
I'll jump in and answer that.
Awesome.
So, Carolyn, I'm at Yavapai College in Arizona. We're a 2-year community college, and this is really interesting because I was asked to teach. So, I have a background in psychology, but I'm not a teacher. And I was asked to teach a class several semesters, actually started in 2020, the pandemic, but I did not, I don't have a teaching background. So I thought I was doing great. I thought everything was fine. And as I'm going through here, I'm understanding why my classes were really bad because I didn't really have support in learning how to get all the stuff that I know that I learned, out to these students, because it was fine with the adult students. The adult students were great, but once I started getting like the freshmen and we started this, the early college. So they're coming to campus and taking classes, and these high school students, they were not impressed at all. And I was like, what am I doing wrong? So it's such a huge thing that you're talking about this, I think, because yes, we're using subject matter experts, and I've seen it in other programs throughout our school where people don't stay long. They come in and they're here for a semester or 2 semesters, and then they're like, I'm not doing this anymore. I don't get paid enough to figure out how to do this on my own. So yes, we're using it. It's not working very well. So I'm really excited to hear what you guys have to say.
Thank you for sharing that. Hopefully you'll learn something as we continue through.
Okay, well, as we move through our presentation, we really have it broken up into 3 parts. The first is, how do you find and onboard the SME? So I'm going to talk about that over the next couple of slides. Lisa's going to talk about working with them, and then we will end with some thoughts on continuing that relationship and supporting them after the course or program is launched. one of the things that I think can be the most challenging is finding who these individuals are. You probably have an idea of the type of person or the expertise that you're looking for, but how do you get put in touch with them? Where do they come from? So we've got some ideas that we're sharing on the screen. Starting with who do you already know has honestly been one of the most successful ways for us to tap into that network. Talking to your existing faculty and staff and researchers, who are they working with out in industry or from other universities? Who do they know that might be a good fit? We also will look at previous attendees from our other programs, whether that be someone that went through the program and has now been elevated to a place where they can help with some of that instruction, or if they know someone in their company or organization that would be a good fit. The other piece, and I mentioned this a little bit, is really thinking about what industry you're serving. Our entire campus has a specific industry that we're dedicated to, but that might not be the case for your institution. We would encourage you to think about, with this specific course, program, credential, whatever you're working on, who is the intended audience for that? And then thinking about, how can I tap into that audience as a potential area to find a SME. Your Chamber of Commerce or your economic development organization could be a good way to get those connections if you're not sure where to start. And starting to think about some of the things that you might look for in this individual. Of course, their technical knowledge on whatever subject matter at hand is important, but a few other things to think about is their years of experience. And we don't mean just longevity on this. Thinking about, do they have a diverse experience? What does their CV or resume hold as we think about the types of roles and organizations they've worked in? What were they responsible for? Does that level of responsibility and experience equate to something that would help translate to the level of education you're trying to provide? Academic background is something that might be a little bit challenging for us working in academia to not focus on. However, especially if you're developing alternative credentials, I'd really encourage you not to limit your SME pool at someone that has to have a master's degree or above. Depending on what type of learning experience and knowledge you are sharing, as well as, of course, paying attention to your accreditation requirements for the type of program you're offering, that academic background likely may be limiting you if you're holding really strong to that. Some of the tools that Lisa's going to talk about later are how to support someone that doesn't have a strong academic background. And then finally, one thing that may be another area worth looking at is, what type of professional organizations are they affiliated with? This can be helpful to not only find SMEs, but think about, how do you evaluate those that you have in your talent pool? Can move to our next slide. So once you find your SME, you've got to bring them into your system. And this is often where we get quite a few questions. And I'm just going to preface with, this is going to look a little bit different for every university. If you have not made friends with your HR and your contract office, whether that's your financial services or you have a purchasing office, now would be the time to go make friends with those people so that you can be really clear on what is the policy and the requirements that we have. So what I'm going to talk about now is what works at our institution. I do think that there are some things that are universal, particularly as you think about the conversation or negotiation towards hiring. But that first bullet point really is going to be subjective to your university. If you have not dealt with this before, there is a variety of ways that someone can be hired in to your organization. Not all of these are going to work well for your situation. Not all of them may be in place at your institution. And so that's where your contracting office and your HR office really need to be somebody that you speak to, probably before you even go out and start talking to SMEs. Some of the options that we utilize on our end are a memorandum of agreement. We also have hired people as part-time employees. And although rarer, we have hired people as contractors. There is a difference in all of these, both for the institution as well as the individual considerations on their tax implications and things like that. So it's important for you to be well versed on what options you have. However, unless you are a CPA, I would encourage you not to give tax advice to the SME that you're trying to hire. They may have questions about which is the right fit for me. And it's just important that you know the differences from your institution, but not feel pressure to explain those options to the SME and how that might impact them personally. So once you know kind of the best way forward into hiring into your institution, the compensation conversation is going to come up. We typically, when Lisa and I are looking at hiring a SME, we have a dollar amount in mind. We've set a budget for either the development or the course and understand what that ballpark would look like. Some of the things that we also consider is what do our faculty members that teach in this area get compensated? And then what does the average industry rate look like for an individual of this nature? Sometimes we're going to be hiring highly specialized people, and they're going to pull a higher rate just due to the specificity of the knowledge that they have. Other times, if we have a maybe more general topic or a more foundational topic, that might get us a lower or more entry level rate. We do typically here at our institution have a starting ballpark that's consistent for compensation. That's derived on an average of our faculty members' hourly rate, our entire faculty body. And so we do look at that as a starting point. But then, as I said, we do consider how highly specialized is this? What is the caliber of the individual that we're trying to hire? And that rate may adjust from there. Some other things that we would really encourage you to consider is what we've got the rest on the slide. Now, we enter most of our SMEs into a memorandum of agreement that includes language on all of these topics. If you are hiring them in whatever fashion, we'd still encourage you to find out how can you have documentation that both parties understand and agree to different things. And some of these are on the slide. The first one, and this is often something that can be overlooked in this process, is who will own that intellectual property. Most institutions have a clear policy for when faculty members develop content or other scholarly work, who owns the intellectual property. But if you're hiring a SME outside of your traditional hiring processes, that policy may or may not apply to them. And it's important that you have a full understanding of that so that if you're compensating them for development of content, you know that if you get to retain that content or not. Some of the other things about what is the timeline? What sort of dates are they held to? Not just the course dates if they're instructing, but their development timeline, setting established dates for progress check-ins, course checkout, as well as what does it look like for evaluation and post-course debriefing. You're hiring them not just to run the course, but all the lead up and aftermath of that as well. And so making sure that's spelled out would be important for both parties. Talking about what compensation covers, whether that rate is just for their time, or does it also cover things like travel, if they need additional technology or materials, anything like that, and what rate they would be compensated at should be spelled out from the beginning. One thing that is particularly in where we're at right now with the status of higher education and some of the things happening in our country is thinking about policies on institutional values, principles of community, other things like that your institution may or may not want you to require of an employee, even if they're on just an MOA or contractor basis. That would be really important to talk about if your HR office isn't aware to seek legal counsel on as well, just so that you're aware what they are required to follow, what is more of a suggestion, and what you can't bring up to them. For example, I was surprised to find out when we first started this process about 9 years ago that we cannot require our MOA hired individuals to follow our university's principles of community. So that just a clarifying moment of what you maybe as an employee are used to following and an expectation may not be the case. And then the final piece that we'd give advice on is who is their single point of contact? We all know how complex a higher education institution can be. And so really making it straightforward for the SME to understand if they need something, who is their single point of contact? Now, that doesn't mean that you might not then refer them to someone else, but really making sure it's easy for them to figure out how to navigate the institutional system by making sure they know they've got one person that's always going to help them with that. Go to our next slide. We wanted to share an example of our MOA. I know this is super tiny type. So, when we get to questions, happy to answer anything that people might want to talk about. But you can see if you magnify in a little bit what some of the language looks like. The other thing that we might want to consider discussing up front is what does that cancellation of agreement need to look like if for either party, this ends up not being able to proceed? What are the terms of that? And that should be spelled out as well. And I think that takes us to our next group input. So I am curious, and I know there's been some good conversation in the chat. If you're not monitoring that, I might encourage you to take a look. But who has input for us on this topic? Where do you find your SMEs? Do you have other tips for contracting and onboarding? Maybe any areas you've had as a challenge with hiring? Please feel free to put that in the chat, or if anybody would want to unmute and come on and share, that would be great.
Okay, that looks like a no.
Feel free to keep posting ideas in the chat. Lisa's going to talk about supporting SMEs once you get them hired.
Yeah, so I'm coming from a lens. I teach as well as I do instructional design and curriculum development. And so that's how I handle my supporting of the industry SMEs. How I start is I think I use backwards design because I think that makes the most sense to people who don't have an educational background, starting with the end in mind. What do people need to know? And then building backwards to get the information that they need. And then one of the things I also do is create a really simple course skeleton. The one I've created here is very simple because it was for a program that went from completely paper to online. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But it'll change, the top levels will change depending on the complexity and what kind of materials they'll use. But it helps them to start thinking about what the different points are and what they're trying to teach, how it might be broken up, and the kind of content that they might need for the students to learn it. It also helps the instructional designer to start thinking about course organization with that SME as well. What's the content we need to learn? How can we break it up? And how can we start scaffolding and create that course? A simple thing, just an Excel spreadsheet, but it does help them to start thinking about breaking that content up. We also support them in utilizing multimedia. What kind of content do they want? Multimedia doesn't always mean fancy. It can mean a photo. It can mean maybe there's just a PDF they need to read, but we do help them through that as well. Some people just need some tutorials, maybe just a handout and they're off and running. Some people need absolute hand holding, and wherever they are, we meet them. They need the hand holding, I'm there to hold that hand. Because right now we're small enough to do that, and hopefully we'll continue to be able to staff and do that. We also work them through the idea of continual assessment and adapting. We're going to create this course. We're going to teach it. There may be issues. Maybe it's not perfect at first. We hope it is. But we'll always be assessing and adapting, ensuring that that learning experience is as great as it can be. And it's also good for the SMEs too, that they're learning and adapting and becoming more confident in their skills as they continue to teach their courses. Another thing we do is ensure the tools and strategies. So obviously we talked about the LMS. We ensure they know how to utilize the LMS, the different things that they can do within it. Again, the hand holding is very, very important. We also do a quality checklist which is actually written into the MOA. One thing that we do to ensure that our courses look the way we need them to and have the quality that we need is in their MOA, they have to pass a quality checklist with the instructional designer. That's part of getting paid. That's part of getting that MOA checked off. We've created our own on our campus based on some of the more popular quality checklists, but I work on the credit and the non-credit side. What we're talking today is mostly non-credit. But on the credit side, if I were to hand our faculty a 6-page quality checklist, they would balk at that. They're not going to look at a quality. It wouldn't work well. So I try to keep it no more than 2 pages. And it's worked well for us because what I do is I present the quality checklist, we talk about it, and since I do the checkoffs anyway on the courses, I can still ensure that all those quality checks are there. I can also ensure that we have the standard course layout because it's so important, as we know, that courses look the same, that there's a standard course layout. Content's different, right? Because every subject is taught differently. We want to ensure for student success that layout is the same. And SMEs really appreciate this. They don't want to have to figure out for themselves. They don't feel like you're bossing them around. They want to be given a layout. They want to be told how to organize it. They like to have that help and that hand holding so that they can do they want to do the best job they can. They want to do the best thing they can for the learners. And so they do appreciate this help. We also ensure that they have access to instructional designers with personalized training and assistance. So as I said before, we meet them where they are. If they're good on their own and they just need a little bit of assistance, that is fine. They can work on their own. But if they need hand holding as well, I'm there for them. We have one program where I think we talk about that on the next slide, but I'll go ahead and start now. But we have one program where we have people that are not super techie, but they have to record videos. If they want to record on their own, they can, but we got to make sure that they're quality. And so what we do, or what I do, is they have to send me a practice video where I ensure that it sounds good and it looks good. They pass that quality check, great, you're off and running. You can start recording on your own. If not, we got to try again with better equipment, or you have to come see me. On the alternative side, if they don't want to do it on their own, they can come see me. I'll sit outside a door while they record, and I will come in and help them to the point of clicking record and not record on Zoom. Whatever level they need. We're lucky that we're able to support them in that way because it's really helping us to build great relationships with these people. It's also helping them to build their skills because once they watch me do it and work with me, and we're about 4 years into that program now, I'm seeing their skills actually increase to where they don't need me as much anymore. And so that's really rewarding to see as well. And we're creating that relationship as well as building their skills, and they're becoming better instructors for it. We have more group input. Do you have any best practices that you use when supporting SMEs through curriculum development? And is there anything you've tried that didn't work? You could chat or unmute yourself. Anybody? Okay, I'm going to move on here. Okay, so this was the program I would talk about. I want to put our money where our mouth is. We have all this expertise because we went through a very stressful transition, I would say. We have a program that we have been working with for 20 plus years, the Kansas Department of Transportation. And when the pandemic hit, we had to take this program that was completely paper, no electronic at all, online in 6 months. We're talking 20 plus classes with just as many instructors, if not more. And we had to get all the content online in 6 months. How we did it was we were very lucky. One of the first instructors to come online was one of the instructors that had been there the longest. So finding a faculty member, well, an instructor, an industry SME who was well respected and who they would listen to do it first was definitely the first step that I would suggest. Because once they saw him do it and they saw the work he had done, we could use him as this example of here's how it can work. Let's work together and get this done. The support for SMEs was putting together that sample course, showing how it could be done, and then creating training materials and then giving them choice. Can you do this by yourself or do you want to come in? And we gave them the choice. Most came in and we worked with them to record videos, create materials, whatever they needed. I was their point of contact. So if they needed help with creating things, it was me. We would create, well, I would say, I'm sorry, I'm getting messed up here. For lab experiences, we did have to bring them in. They did have hands-on lab experiences, which we could not recreate in the pandemic. So what we did do is have the instructors come in and we would record them in the lab of which they would have learned. And so those, we did have to have them come and create. We could have only a couple people on campus at a time. So it would be me, a lab tech, and the instructor. We would record the different labs and use those for that hands-on experience until we could get them back in person. But for the lectures, we could just lecture as we were doing now and record that. And that's how we did those. Again, if they want to do them themselves, they could. They just had to do a quality check first. And what we did is we would bring a few classes online, see how those would go. And that would allow us to correct things as we were going, kind of correct and assess as we went. And as we slowly brought things online, within 6 months, we did have this entire program online. And they have liked it so much that it has continued. In fact, we now have classes on demand. The program has continued to grow. We do still have to have those hands-on experience because it is Department of Transportation. They're building roads. They got to put their hands on things because they're going to do hands-on work. But this program has been very successful, and we built the way that we support all of our industry SMEs based on this program. And it's been very successful.
So as we think about, you've launched your program, your course, how do you keep empowering your SMEs? Lisa talked about her experience in working with the Kansas Department of Transportation members. And as that relationship has grown, they're a little more self-sufficient, they're more comfortable. And we just would encourage all of you to keep them involved in the process, even beyond just developing the content and teaching it. So some additional ways to think about empowering them that would hopefully then help you retain and grow that relationship is continue to provide them coaching. Lisa started us off by talking about how they have vast technical expertise. They know their industry, but they might not know anything about teaching. So continuing to be on site for them, even if it's an online program, sit in their course and think about how do you provide them in the moment coaching so they can continue to improve their skill set. As you think about evaluating when the learners are going to complete an evaluation, ask the SME, what would they want to know? Share with them your standard evaluation, but what would they want to have added? What do they want to know about their performance from those learners? And then definitely share the evaluation results. If you can, doing a debrief with them is even more powerful, whether that is something you do after the first course, every course, annually, that might look different depending on the SME and the program. But talking about what went well and what didn't, not only from the evaluations, but from the SME's perspective and your perspective, so that you can continue to refine both the education as well as the SME's skill set. One of our ideas is connecting them with veteran instructors, and there was some comments in the chat about doing that exact thing. So thank you for sharing how your institution's doing that. Also thinking about helping them see the work that they're doing within the larger picture of your institution or the industry you're serving. It's very easy to be focused on, we're developing this one course and it might seem kind of a siloed effort, but helping them understand how that supports the larger goals, the larger educational portfolio, or the mission of your institution really will help them feel more connected and empowered, which in turn would hopefully help them be more excited to continue to work with you. And then finally, think about other ways to include them even outside of the course development and evaluation process. Do you release an annual report? Do you have an email distribution list? Could they be a good fit for some of your advisory boards? Thinking about other ways to include them in the university's work and communication methods helps them continue to feel connected to you. And so, whether you want to work with them directly or go to them for a referral in the future and start this process all over again, you've got them as a strong network partner for you. That is all of the content we have to share with you all today. We would be happy to answer any questions or hear any other ideas for the next few minutes. But I do just want to say thank you so much for spending some of your day with us. It's always fun to share about our experience. We've delivered this presentation a few times and hope that there was at least one tip that you could all take away. So with that, I'll pause and see if there's any questions or other ideas. Lisa, is there anything you'd want to add in summary?
There's not, unless somebody, I would also like, if anyone has any ideas of something we could be doing better, happy to hear that as well.
Absolutely. Okay, well, thank you so much to those that were able to share some ideas. Thank you so much for your time. It was great visiting with you all, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Yeah, great. Thank you, guys. I learned a lot about what you all do there on your campus and so forth. I appreciate you taking the time to do this.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Have a good rest of the day.